But anyway, eventually, June the 4th came, and a Jeep came up and handed me the message that they had sighted the Japs at 315 degrees and about 180 miles, and to take off and attack.
And they gave us the heading and distance, and away we went, not knowing if it was a merchant ship, it was an aircraft carrier, or what it was. And we had no more than cleared the island, and you could look up and see the Japanese Zeros and dive bombers in waves coming in to hit the little island of Midway.
It was a misty, foggy day with a lot of clouds up about 2,000 feet.
But we went on out and were down low, 50, 100 feet off the water, and suddenly popped over the horizon was a whole flock of Japanese ships. And they were everywhere. The first ones we encountered were destroyers, way out in front of the main battle fleet.
But we hit a carrier right head on.
And our gunners were keeping busy, firing as we approached and as we left. But then the Zeros picked us up. And that's where the problems came in.
Just off to our right of the carrier, there were 6 Zeros, wing to wing. So we had to turn left to keep from hitting the Zeros head on. So we turned left down the line of ships to get enough room to turn back and make 180 and come back on our carrier, which worked out very good. The only problem was that somehow or another the fighters must have caught up with Mays and Watson in our formation, because they weren't flying a tight formation, and Murray and I were up forward, and we weren't bothered as much with the fighters as the other 2 planes were. So I never knew whether the fighters shot the other 2 down or whether an aircraft from the ship shot them down.
And in order to approach our target, which was the carrier Akagi, at a 45-degree angle from the bow, we had to cross this great expanse of water where every ship fired their anti-aircraft guns. And that was a bad one because the big guns were shooting into the water, causing water spouts that we had to duck. And the Navy had instructed us that we had to drop at 150 miles an hour at 150 feet. Well, the airplane didn't fly 150 miles an hour. That was almost stall speed. So we were somewhat higher than that when we crossed this barrage area. And the Zeros, you've got to give them credit for right with us. They went through that barrage area just the same as we did, and they were shooting us all the way through.
But anyway, we turned the fish loose, and I didn't want to go back to Midway down the same line of fire that the Japs were returning from. So instead of turning right to go back, I turned to the left and went north and then west to circle the fleet, and I was going to go south back to Midway and miss all of the Japanese fighters.
And immediately thereafter we were jumped by the Japanese Zero planes, and they were plentiful, and they were very brave when they had you outnumbered.
And I pulled up in the clouds, and I thought the battle was over, when all of a sudden a whole bunch of 20 millimeter came by right underneath my feet. A plane had slipped up on us and shot from low left, low right, and the waist gunner got him, but in the meantime he shot out our hydraulic system.
we evaded, went in the clouds, the pilot did, and one of our evaded some of the action. At another time, they were coming right at us, and our pilot went into immediate dive. In fact, I wasn't even strapped in the seat, and I hit the ceiling or the top of the plane. But we evaded them and finally got away from them. And then after all that, then we didn't know where we were.
So we continued straight south, still out of the line of return zeros, until we came to a little sand key down there that our navigator recognized, and then we turned east and hit Midway right on the nose.
And we landed at Midway and had to crash land. And it's a very good crash landing type. All he did was our pilot college had all to get in the rear of the plane.
I dropped the gear, but then the nose didn't come down because we didn't have any hydraulics at all. And the tower told me to ditch, but I had learned from the 22nd Bomb Group you don't ditch. So I came in and landed, and the nose dropped down and the plane was going straight. So I crawled up on top and sat up on top of the canopy and held on to the radio mast so I'd be ready to swim when we went off the end of the runway. But we stopped right on the very, very end of the runway.
After our launch, the Akaga was turning toward us, and we had been coming in from 45 off the bow, so it was almost a straight shot down the flight deck, which was fortunate simply because every gun on the carrier was firing out and up, but nobody had prepared for some airplane flying the full length of their deck. And that's where we went, down the deck, and in fact low enough that I think we could have touched the deck with our wheels if we had put them down. But we'd been shot up so bad that the airplane was flying a bit hazardously. You'd try to make a turn and it'd want to fall off on us. The rudder was shaking and banging, and the engines were pounding pretty badly, which we didn't know was all the blades of the propellers were perforated. Some were hit with pretty big rounds because great gaping chunks of steel were torn out of those props, and just small slivers were left holding them on. Well, by that time, all the cushions in the back of the airplane were on fire. The gunners were shot up, and we had no defense except speed. And we got on the water. The co-pilot went back, and if somebody would ask us what we did out at Midway, we'd say we dropped a torpedo. And honestly, that's all we could say.
I didn't have anything else to do at the time. It was my plane. I was concerned. Naturally, I got up and went back and tried to do something about it. Then when I found out what a slipstream is all about, I tried to throw those cushions out the side window. It wouldn't go. 200 miles or better wind going by there, just threw it right back in. All it was fire in those cushions. I finally took them and threw them out through the tail gunner position.
Well, I think that most historians have come to realize that what the marauders did at Midway was to get the Zeros down from altitude so that when the Navy dive bombers came, they encountered no air opposition and were able to deliver a fatal blow to the Japanese task force. Well, back in Hawaii and back in the USA, the 69th and 70th Bomb Squadrons had departed the U.S., and there were still a few B-26 crews left. And the British, well, they were anxious to use the B-26, and Ken Wellborn obliged.